My name is Sierra, and I am 34 years old. I used to believe I had the perfect marriage to a successful attorney in Chicago. But one night, everything I thought I knew came crashing down around me. I stood in the middle of a grand ballroom, my hair gripped tightly in my husband's fist, my knees pressed against the cold marble floor, and hundreds of eyes staring at me in silence. The humiliation I felt in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Before I share my story, let me know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever imagined that the person who promised to love and protect you could become the one who destroys you in front of the entire world? Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. I never imagined my life would turn out this way. For years, I believed I was living a dream that most women would envy. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, building my career from the comfort of our beautiful penthouse in Lincoln Park. The view of Lake Michigan from our floor-to-ceiling windows was something I never got tired of. Every morning, I would sit with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and pink, feeling grateful for the life I had built alongside my husband. Our home was decorated with modern furniture, clean lines, and neutral tones that I had carefully selected over the years. I took pride in creating a space that felt both luxurious and welcoming. My design clients often complimented my taste, and I suppose I let myself believe that my ability to create beautiful things extended to my marriage as well. I thought I had designed a perfect life. My husband, Derek Harrison, was 38 years old and a senior partner at Harrison & Blake law firm. The firm had been founded by his father decades ago, and Derek had inherited not only the business, but also the reputation that came with it. He was tall, with neatly styled brown hair that he kept perfectly groomed at all times. His suits were always tailored to perfection, and he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. When I first met Derek 8 years ago, he was everything I thought I wanted. I had been hired to redesign the logo and branding materials for his law firm, and from our very first meeting, he pursued me with an intensity that made me feel special. He sent flowers to my apartment after our initial consultation. He remembered every small detail I mentioned about myself. He made me feel like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. After dating for a year, Derek proposed to me at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Chicago skyline. The ring was enormous, the setting was romantic, and I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was held at the Peninsula Hotel, with 300 guests and every luxury detail imaginable. Looking back now, I realize that the grandness of it all was more about Derek's image than about celebrating our love. But at the time, I was too blinded by happiness to notice. The first 3 years of our marriage were genuinely wonderful, or at least they seemed that way. Derek would come home with bouquets of peonies, my favorite flower. We traveled together to Paris, Rome, and the Maldives. He introduced me proudly at every firm event, and his colleagues often told us we were the perfect couple. I believed them. I believed everything. To support Derek's career, I gradually pulled back from some of my larger design projects. I wanted to be available for firm dinners, client events, and the social obligations that came with being married to a man in his position. I told myself it was a temporary sacrifice, that once Derek made senior partner, things would calm down and I could focus on my own ambitions again. But somehow, that day never came. Around our 4th anniversary, I started noticing small changes in Derek's behavior. He began working later and later, often not coming home until well past midnight. When I asked about it, he always had reasonable explanations. There was a major lawsuit he was handling, a difficult client who demanded constant attention, partnership meetings that ran long. I accepted every excuse because I trusted him completely. But the late nights were just the beginning. Derek became more distant at home. Our conversations grew shorter. He stopped asking about my day or my projects. When we were together, he seemed distracted, always checking his phone or lost in thought. The affectionate touches that used to come naturally began to disappear. I told myself it was stress, that the pressure of his job was taking a toll, and that things would get better once the current case was resolved. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first time I heard the name Meredith Kane was at a dinner party Derek hosted for his colleagues. He mentioned her casually while discussing a recent case victory, describing her as the newest associate at the firm and praising her sharp legal mind. I thought nothing of it at the time. Derek often talked about the people he worked with, and it seemed normal for him to acknowledge a talented new hire. Meredith was 29 years old, a Yale Law School graduate with ambitions that matched her credentials. The first time I met her in person was at the firm's annual Christmas party that December. She was striking in a way that immediately drew attention. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in loose waves that fell past her shoulders. Her figure was slender, almost delicate, and she dressed in designer labels that I recognized from the pages of fashion magazines. When Derek introduced us, she smiled politely and shook my hand. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at my husband that made me uncomfortable. I dismissed the feeling as paranoia and pushed it from my mind. As the months passed, Meredith's name came up more and more in our conversations. Derek spoke about her constantly, always with admiration. Meredith had made a brilliant argument in court. Meredith had impressed a major client. Meredith was helping him prepare for the biggest case of his career. At first, I tried to be supportive. I told myself it was good that Derek had capable people working alongside him. But slowly, something began to shift inside me. Derek started guarding his phone in ways he never had before. He changed his passcode and began taking calls in another room. When I walked into his office unexpectedly, he would quickly close his laptop or turn his screen away. If I asked who he was texting, he would brush me off or accuse me of being paranoid. His patience with me grew thin, and our conversations often ended in arguments. Then came the criticism. Derek began commenting on my appearance in ways that felt pointed and cruel. He would look at me in my comfortable work-from-home clothes and make remarks about how I used to put more effort into how I looked. He compared me unfavorably to the women at his firm, suggesting that I had let myself go. I responded by joining an expensive gym, buying new clothes, and scheduling regular appointments at the salon. I thought if I could just become prettier, more polished, more like the women he worked with, maybe he would look at me the way he used to. But nothing I did seemed to make a difference. If anything, my efforts only seemed to annoy him. One night, about 6 months before the incident that would change everything, I discovered the first real evidence that my marriage was falling apart. Derek had fallen asleep on the couch after coming home late, his phone resting on his chest. When it lit up with a notification, I glanced at the screen without thinking. The message was from someone saved simply as M, and the words made my blood run cold. I miss you. I am kissing you all over. My heart stopped. My hands trembled. I wanted to wake him up right then and demand an explanation, but something held me back. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe it was denial. I convinced myself that there had to be another explanation. Maybe it was a joke between colleagues. Maybe I had misread the message. Maybe M was someone else entirely. But from that night forward, I could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I began watching Derek more closely, noting every late night and every excuse. Sleep became difficult. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction and searching for signs I might have missed. When the weight of my suspicions became too heavy to carry alone, I reached out to my oldest friend. Naomi Washington had been my roommate in college and remained my closest confidant through the years. She was a clinical psychologist now, smart and straightforward, the kind of person who would tell you the truth, even when you did not want to hear it. Over coffee at a quiet cafe far from my neighborhood, I told Naomi everything. The late nights, the secrecy with his phone, the text message I had seen, the way Derek had been treating me. Naomi listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Sierra," she said, "I am not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Before you confront him, make sure you have all the information you need. Do not let him gaslight you into thinking you are crazy." I nodded, but part of me still did not want to believe it. I loved Derek. We had built a life together. The thought of losing everything we had was more than I could bear. So I made the decision to wait, to watch, to gather more evidence before I said anything. I had no idea that the truth would be far worse than anything I had imagined. After weeks of sleepless nights and mounting anxiety, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who came highly recommended by a friend of Naomi's. The cost was significant, but I needed to know the truth, whatever it might be. Marcus worked quickly and discreetly. 2 weeks after I hired him, he sent me a detailed report along with a folder of photographs that confirmed my worst fears. The images showed Derek and Meredith entering the Waldorf Astoria hotel together, their body language unmistakably intimate. In one photo, they were kissing in his car, her hand on his face, his arm wrapped around her waist. Another showed them leaving the hotel the next morning, both looking relaxed and happy in a way that made my stomach turn. Among the photographs, one detail stood out above all others. Meredith was wearing a Cartier bracelet on her wrist. I recognized it immediately because I had found the receipt for it 3 months earlier, hidden in Derek's desk drawer. When I asked him about it, he told me it was a gift for a client. I had believed him without question. The night I received Marcus's report, I locked myself in our guest bedroom and cried until I had no tears left. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of trust and love and sacrifice. All of it had been a lie. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. I felt like a failure for not being enough to keep my husband faithful. The pain was so overwhelming that I could barely breathe. When I confronted Derek 3 days later, I came prepared with evidence. I spread the photographs across our dining room table and watched as his expression shifted from confusion to anger to something that looked almost like relief. He denied everything at first, calling the photos doctored, accusing me of trying to ruin his reputation. But when I played him the recording Marcus had obtained of his phone call with Meredith, his lies crumbled. "Fine," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. "You want the truth? Yes, I have been seeing Meredith. And honestly, it is your own fault. You have become boring, Sierra. You sit around this apartment in sweatpants all day, doing your little design projects, while I am out there building an empire. Meredith understands me. She challenges me. She is everything you are not anymore." His words cut deeper than any knife could. I stood there in silence, feeling the last remnants of my love for him wither and die. When I finally found my voice, I told him I wanted a divorce. Derek laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound that I had never heard from him before. "Divorce?" he said. "Go ahead and try. Do you have any idea who I am? I have the best lawyers in this city on my payroll. By the time I am done with you, you will walk away with nothing. In fact, maybe I will have my team dig up some evidence that you were the one cheating. See how that plays in court." I could not believe what I was hearing. This was not the man I married. This was a stranger, wearing his face, someone capable of cruelty I never knew existed. I realized in that moment that Derek did not just want to end our marriage. He wanted to destroy me. In the weeks that followed, Derek made good on his threats to isolate me. He canceled my credit cards without warning, claiming they were for business purposes only. He told his mother and sister that I had been emotionally unstable and difficult, turning his family against me before I had a chance to share my side of the story. His mother called me one afternoon, her voice dripping with contempt, telling me that I was an ungrateful woman who did not deserve her son. She said I should have tried harder to make him happy instead of driving him into the arms of another woman. Our mutual friends, most of whom were connected to Derek's firm, stopped inviting me to gatherings. When I reached out, my calls and messages went unanswered. I found myself increasingly alone, with only Naomi standing by my side. She became my lifeline during those dark months, checking on me daily, reminding me that I was not crazy, that none of this was my fault. Eventually, I sought legal counsel of my own. Rachel Donovan was a divorce attorney, known for handling high-profile cases involving difficult spouses. During our first meeting, she listened to my story and reviewed the evidence I had gathered. Her advice was clear and practical. She told me that I had a strong case, but I needed more documentation of our shared assets and Derek's behavior. She recommended that I stay in the marriage temporarily while we built an ironclad file for the divorce proceedings. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pretending that I had accepted my situation while secretly planning my escape. Derek seemed pleased by my apparent submission. He believed he had won, that he had broken me into compliance. He continued his affair openly, no longer bothering to hide his phone calls or late nights. He treated me like a servant in my own home, expecting me to maintain appearances while he lived his double life. But behind closed doors, I was gathering everything I needed. I photographed financial documents. I recorded conversations where Derek threatened me or admitted to hiding assets. I copied files from his home office when he was away. Every piece of evidence went to Rachel, who assured me that when the time came, we would be ready. I was waiting for the right moment to make my move. I just did not know that moment would come sooner than I expected. The invitation arrived in early October, printed on thick cream-colored paper with the Harrison and Blake logo embossed in gold. The annual gala was the most important event on the firm's social calendar, a night when partners entertained their biggest clients and celebrated their successes. Attendance was mandatory for all senior partners and their spouses, which meant I had no choice but to go. Derek made his expectations clear in the days leading up to the event. I was to look presentable, smile for photographs, and play the role of the devoted wife. Any sign of conflict between us would reflect poorly on him and damage his standing at the firm. He spoke to me as though I were an employee receiving instructions, not a partner of 8 years. On the night of the gala, I dressed carefully in a floor-length black gown that I had purchased years ago for a similar event. It was elegant and understated, appropriate for my role as a supporting character in Derek's performance. I styled my hair simply and applied minimal makeup, knowing that no matter what I did, it would not be enough for him. When I emerged from the bedroom, Derek looked me over with obvious disappointment. "That is what you are wearing?" he asked, his lip curling slightly. "Meredith told me she is coming in Valentino tonight. You could have at least made an effort." I said nothing. There was no point in defending myself or explaining that I no longer had access to the kind of money that would buy designer gowns. I simply collected my clutch and followed him to the car, dreading the evening ahead. The Palmer House Hilton was breathtaking that night. The ballroom had been transformed into an elegant wonderland of crystal chandeliers, white flowers, and candlelight. A live jazz band played softly in one corner, while waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Over 300 guests filled the room, including attorneys, judges, corporate executives, and members of the press. The moment we entered, Derek spotted Meredith and moved toward her as though pulled by a magnet. She was wearing a crimson-red Valentino gown that clung to her figure and announced her presence to everyone in the room. When Derek reached her side, his entire demeanor changed. He smiled in a way he had not smiled at me in months. He touched her arm with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. He introduced her to a group of clients as the most brilliant associate the firm had ever hired. I stood several feet away, watching this display with a mixture of pain and disgust. A few of Derek's colleagues glanced at me with expressions that bordered on pity. They knew. Everyone knew. I was the last one to see what had been happening right in front of my face. For the next hour, I wandered through the party alone, making small talk with people who clearly did not want to speak with me. I nursed a glass of sparkling water and counted the minutes until I could leave. The humiliation of being so publicly abandoned by my husband was almost more than I could bear. It was during my third trip to the refreshment table that everything changed. I was walking carefully through the crowded room, holding a glass of red wine that a waiter had handed me, when someone stepped directly into my path. I tried to stop, but my momentum carried me forward, and the wine sloshed out of the glass, landing on the white silk dress of the woman in front of me. It was Meredith. She had changed out of her red Valentino into a white designer gown, and now a spray of crimson stained the fabric across her torso. For a moment, we both stood frozen, staring at the damage. "I am so sorry," I said immediately, reaching for a napkin. "It was an accident. Let me help you clean this up." But Meredith did not want my help. Her face contorted with rage as she began to scream. "What did you do?" she shrieked, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Do you have any idea how much this dress cost? This is haute couture. You did this on purpose, you pathetic, jealous woman." The music stopped. Conversations died. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward us. I tried to explain that it was an accident, that I had not even seen her approaching, but Meredith would not let me speak. She continued to yell, her voice growing louder and more hysterical, drawing an ever larger crowd of spectators. Then Derek appeared, and the nightmare truly began. His face was red with fury as he pushed through the crowd. Before I could say a word in my own defense, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked downward with brutal force. The pain was immediate and blinding. My knees buckled, and I found myself on the marble floor, looking up at the man I had married through a blur of tears. "Apologize to her," Derek commanded, his voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "Get on your knees and apologize for ruining her dress. Do it now." I could not believe what was happening. My scalp burned where he gripped my hair. My knees ached from the impact with the hard floor. Hundreds of people were watching, and not a single one moved to help me. They stood frozen, champagne glasses in hand, witnessing my complete humiliation. Derek yanked my hair again, harder this time. "I said apologize." The words came out of me in a broken whisper. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Meredith smiled, a cold, triumphant expression that I will never forget. She looked down at me like I was something unpleasant she had stepped in. "That is not good enough," she said. "This dress cost $5,000. You are going to pay for it." Derek nodded. "Of course she will. She will pay for everything." And then he released me, letting me collapse onto the cold marble floor, and walked away with his mistress on his arm. The crowd parted for them as they moved toward the bar, and slowly, the murmur of conversation resumed as though nothing had happened, as though a man had not just assaulted his wife in front of 300 witnesses. I lay there on the floor for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My tears fell silently onto the polished stone. My entire body trembled with shock and shame. This was the lowest moment of my life. The absolute bottom of everything I thought I knew about myself and my marriage. But somewhere deep inside me, beneath the humiliation and the pain, something else was stirring. Something that felt like the first spark of a fire that had been dormant for far too long. I do not know how long I lay on that cold marble floor. It could have been 30 seconds or 3 minutes. Time seemed to stop completely as I processed what had just happened. My husband had assaulted me in front of hundreds of people. He had forced me to my knees and made me apologize to his mistress. And not a single person had done anything to stop him. As I lay there, my cheek pressed against the polished stone, I caught sight of my own reflection in the glossy surface. The woman staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared with tears, her eyes filled with a pain that seemed bottomless. She looked broken. She looked defeated. And in that moment, I heard my mother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside me. My mother had passed away 4 years earlier, just before my 4th wedding anniversary. But her words had stayed with me always. She used to say that a woman's dignity was her most precious possession, more valuable than beauty or wealth or even love. "My daughter," she would tell me, "never let anyone make you forget your worth. Never let anyone put you on your knees unless you choose to kneel." I had forgotten those words somewhere along the way. I had let Derek slowly chip away at my sense of self until there was almost nothing left. But lying there on that ballroom floor, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a spectacle, I remembered. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up from the ground. My knees ached, and my scalp still burned where Derek had grabbed my hair, but I forced myself to stand straight. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Something had shifted inside me. The fear and shame that had been controlling me for months began to recede, replaced by something stronger. It was not anger, exactly, though there was anger too. It was clarity. For the first time in a long time, I could see exactly who Derek was and exactly what I needed to do. I scanned the room and spotted the small stage at the far end of the ballroom, where a podium and microphone had been set up for the evening's speeches. Derek was nowhere near it. He and Meredith were at the bar, laughing about something, completely unconcerned about the wife he had just humiliated. My heart pounded as I walked toward the stage. Each step felt deliberate, like I was moving through water. People glanced at me as I passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. No one tried to stop me. Perhaps they thought I was going to make a scene and wanted to see what would happen. Perhaps they simply did not care. When I reached the stage, I climbed the 3 short steps and approached the microphone. My hands were trembling slightly as I adjusted it to my height. The feedback squeal drew everyone's attention, and within seconds, every eye in the room was on me. I cleared my throat and began to speak. Good evening, everyone. For those who do not know me, my name is Sierra Harrison, and I am the wife of Derek Harrison, senior partner at this firm. Or at least, I was his wife until about 10 minutes ago, when he grabbed me by the hair and threw me to the ground in front of all of you. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Derek pushing toward the stage, his face contorted with rage. But 2 security guards stepped into his path. Someone, perhaps one of the other partners, had signaled them to keep him back. I continued speaking, my voice growing steadier with each word. I know many of you witnessed what just happened, and I know that none of you did anything to help me. I understand. Derek is a powerful man, and powerful men are difficult to challenge. But tonight, I am going to tell you the truth about the man you work for, the man you do business with, the man you call your friend. I pulled my phone from my clutch and connected it to the presentation system that had been set up for the firm's promotional video. Within moments, the photographs from Marcus's investigation filled the large screen behind me. Derek and Meredith at the hotel. Derek and Meredith kissing in his car. Derek and Meredith looking every bit the couple they truly were. For the past year, my husband has been having an affair with Meredith Kane, I said, pointing to the screen. He has lied to me, manipulated me, and tonight, he assaulted me in front of hundreds of witnesses. But his betrayal of me is not the only betrayal here. I have evidence that Derek has been hiding assets from the firm and from me, funneling money into private accounts that even his partners do not know about. The room erupted in chaos. Partners were shouting questions. Clients were pulling out their phones to record. Meredith had disappeared into the crowd, her white dress with its wine stain nowhere to be seen. And Derek was being physically restrained by security as he screamed threats and obscenities at me. I stood at that podium and I told them everything. The emotional abuse, the financial manipulation, the lies and the gaslighting. I played recordings of Derek threatening me, admitting to hiding money, boasting about how he would destroy me in the divorce. By the time I finished, there was not a single person in that room who could claim ignorance of who Derek Harrison really was. When I finally stepped down from the stage, the crowd parted before me like the Red Sea. I walked with my head held high, my heart still racing, but my spirit completely calm. Near the exit, I found Naomi waiting for me. She had arrived at the gala an hour earlier, at my request, not knowing exactly what I had planned, but ready to support me no matter what. She wrapped her arm around my shoulders and led me out into the cool October night. Behind us, the chaos continued. Sirens wailed in the distance as someone called the police. Reporters who had been covering the gala were already filing stories on their phones. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen, Naomi said as we walked to her car. I smiled for the first time in months. I should have done it a long time ago. That night, I did not return to the penthouse I had shared with Derek. Instead, I went to Naomi's apartment in Wicker Park and slept in her guest room. Before I closed my eyes, I called Rachel to tell her what had happened. She was silent for a long moment after I finished, and then she laughed. "Well," she said, "that is certainly one way to start a divorce. Get some rest, Sierra. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. For the first time in over a year, I slept deeply and peacefully. The nightmare of my marriage was finally ending, and I was ready to fight for the life I deserved. The morning after the gala, I woke to discover that my life had become headline news. The video of Derek assaulting me had been posted online by multiple guests and had gone viral overnight. News outlets across the city were covering the story, and my name was everywhere. Wife of prominent attorney exposes affair and abuse at firm gala. Chicago lawyer faces assault charges after public attack on spouse. The headlines went on and on. Derek's attempts at damage control were swift but ineffective. He released a statement through his attorney claiming that the situation had been misrepresented and that he would be pursuing legal action against anyone who defamed him. But the video was clear. The photographs were undeniable, and the recordings I had played at the gala spoke for themselves. Within 48 hours, Harrison and Blake Law Firm was in crisis. 3 of the firm's largest corporate clients announced they were severing ties, citing concerns about associating with someone accused of domestic violence. 2 of the senior partners called an emergency meeting to discuss Derek's future at the firm he had helped build. The outcome was unanimous. Derek was asked to resign effective immediately or face formal removal. Meredith did not fare much better. The Illinois State Bar Association opened an investigation into her conduct, both for the affair with a married superior and for potential involvement in Derek's financial improprieties. Before the investigation could even begin, the firm terminated her employment. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had packed up her desk and left the building without saying goodbye to anyone. Meanwhile, I moved forward with my divorce proceedings. Rachel filed the paperwork the day after the gala, citing adultery, abuse, and financial misconduct. The evidence we had gathered over the previous months was overwhelming. Derek's own recordings and admissions made it impossible for him to contest my claims. His attorneys tried to negotiate a settlement that would minimize his exposure, but Rachel refused anything less than what I deserved. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. The judge, who had reviewed all of the evidence, including the viral video from the gala, ruled decisively in my favor. I was awarded 60% of our shared assets, including full ownership of the penthouse. Derek was ordered to pay spousal support for 3 years, a sum that would allow me to rebuild my life without financial stress. His attempts to portray me as unstable or unfaithful were dismissed as baseless. But the legal consequences for Derek extended far beyond our divorce. The Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission opened an investigation into his conduct, examining not only the abuse, but also the financial irregularities I had exposed. After a lengthy review, they made their determination. Derek Harrison was disbarred, his license to practice law revoked permanently. The firm his father had built was now led by others, and Derek's name was quietly removed from the partnership. The last time I saw Derek was on the day our divorce was finalized. He looked like a shadow of the man I had married. His expensive suits had been replaced by off-the-rack clothing. His confident posture had slumped into defeat. He glared at me across the courtroom with pure hatred in his eyes. But there was nothing he could do. He had lost everything, and he had no one to blame but himself. I learned later that Meredith had left him within weeks of the scandal. Without his money, his power, or his position, she had no use for him. He was forced to sell his car and move into a small apartment in a suburb far from the city where he had once been a king. His mother, humiliated by the public nature of his downfall, stopped returning his calls. I did not take pleasure in his suffering. I had loved him once, truly and completely, and watching him destroy himself brought no joy. But I did feel a profound sense of justice. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself, and the world had responded by holding him accountable. With the legal matters settled, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life. I poured myself back into my design work with renewed energy and passion. Within 6 months, I had opened my own studio in a converted warehouse space in the West Loop. I hired a small team of talented designers and began taking on projects that challenged and excited me in ways my work had not done in years. But my healing extended beyond my career. I began writing about my experience on a blog, sharing my story with other women who had survived abusive relationships. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people wrote to me, sharing their own stories of manipulation and recovery. I realized that my experience, as painful as it had been, could help others find the courage to leave their own toxic situations. I was invited to speak at conferences about domestic violence awareness. I partnered with organizations that provided resources for abuse survivors. I used the platform I had unexpectedly gained to advocate for stronger protections for women in difficult marriages. The work was meaningful in a way that nothing in my life had been before. Slowly, I also began to open myself to the possibility of connection again. I made new friends who knew nothing of my past with Derek. I started attending social events without fear of judgment or embarrassment, and eventually, about 18 months after my divorce, I began dating again. I was not looking for love. I was simply allowing myself to be open to whatever the future might hold. It has been 2 years since that night at the gala. 2 years since I stood on that cold marble floor and made the decision to reclaim my life. So much has changed that sometimes I barely recognize the woman I used to be. The early months after the divorce were the hardest. Even though I had won in every measurable way, the trauma of what Derek had done did not simply disappear. I started seeing a therapist twice a week, working through the years of manipulation and abuse that had slowly eroded my sense of self. There were nights when I woke up in a cold sweat, dreaming that I was back in that ballroom, Derek's hand in my hair, hundreds of eyes watching me kneel. There were days when simple tasks felt overwhelming, when the weight of everything I had been through pressed down on me like a physical force. But slowly, session by session and day by day, I began to heal. I learned to recognize the ways Derek had conditioned me to doubt myself. I learned to trust my own perceptions again. I learned to forgive myself for staying as long as I did, understanding that leaving an abusive relationship is never as simple as outsiders imagine it to be. One of the most important realizations I came to during my therapy was that I did not need to hate Derek in order to move on. Hatred would only keep me tethered to the past. Instead, I chose to see him as someone who was deeply broken, someone whose need for control and validation had destroyed every relationship in his life. I felt sorry for him in a way, though I knew better than to let that sympathy draw me back into his orbit. The lessons I learned from my marriage have shaped everything I do now. I understand that love should never require you to shrink yourself. I know that respect is not negotiable, not something you earn by being perfect or compliant. I've learned that the people who truly love you will never make you feel small. Today, I am 36 years old. My design studio is thriving, and I have a team of 12 people who share my vision for creating beautiful, meaningful work. My blog has grown into a foundation that provides resources and support for survivors of domestic abuse. I speak regularly about my experience, and every time I share my story, I hear from women who found the courage to leave their own difficult situations because of it. I am also in a new relationship. His name is James, and he is nothing like Derek. He is kind and patient and genuinely interested in who I am, not just what I can do for him. We have been together for 8 months now, and while I am not rushing toward any particular destination, I am hopeful about the future in a way I had forgotten how to be. I do not know what the next chapter of my life will bring. But I know this with absolute certainty. I will never again allow anyone to treat me the way Derek did. I will never again sacrifice my dignity for the sake of keeping peace. I will never again be afraid to stand up for myself, even when the whole world is watching. If you are listening to this story, and you recognize something of your own experience in my words, I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that what you are going through is not your fault. And most importantly, I want you to know that there is a way out. It will not be easy. It will take courage and support, and probably more strength than you think you have. But you can do it. You deserve to be loved and respected and valued. You deserve so much more than you have been settling for. So here is my question for you today. Have you ever had to find the courage to stand up for yourself in a difficult situation? What helped you find that strength? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I know that your stories might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Sharing this video could help it reach someone who needs to hear these words today. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And wherever you are in your own journey, I am sending you strength and hope and the unwavering belief that you deserve a beautiful life. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next story.